Raiders start with Tyree Wilson, the edge defender out of Texas Tech at pick 7. Michael Mayer in round 2, pick 35. Byron Young, the Alabama version, defensive tackle.
He went ahead of the Tennessee version.
He did. Yeah, Byron Young at pick 70 over in round 3. They get Trey Tucker, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati, who goes ahead
of his teammate,
Tyler Scott. Who was,
the Raiders' entire draft is like drafting people ahead of other people that made more sense.
Jacorian Bennett, cornerback out of Maryland in round 4. They come back in round 4 with QB Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue. I'm all in on that. Christopher Smith, safety out of Georgia in round 5. A couple of other picks in rounds 6 and 7 as well. What do you think of the Raiders draft overall?
It was an interesting draft. I don't want to say I dislike it, but it's curious. So Tyree Wilson, number 7. We speculated before the draft and on draft night that Wilson might actually slide quite a bit. There was reports about his foot injury being a lot worse than anticipated. Chris was saying that he might not be ready for week 1. Like, that's how bad it was. And Chris also referenced some doctors saying like that might actually be a thing that prevents him hitting his ceiling at all going into the NFL. It makes sense when you tally the idea that, remember, he was supposed to have an individual pro day workout because he wasn't going to get to his real one, and that just never happened. So that kind of suggests that the foot injury is at least still a factor. We talked about Wilson a lot. You know, the data doesn't really back him up as a prospect that's likely to be good. The grading doesn't either. The size obviously does. His tape is fun. It's destructive at times. It's also fairly one-dimensional and limited. At number 7 overall, just not a pick we think has a particularly high chance of working out. I mean, that's the bottom line with it.
Yeah, that's you and I. I mean,
yes.
Mike Renner before he left PFF,
and the data.
Trevor at PFF, both like him. If you just gave me the film and said, Steve, watch these 100 plays, do you like Tyree Wilson? I'd say overall, yeah. I mean, for me, I came to the conclusion I'd rather take him late first, if anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, the data does not back up top 10 pick. And
Ben Stockwell, our analysis lead, took one look at his tape and was like, don't really understand the hype for this guy. Like, I think there's a lot of, and the closer we got to the draft, the more people I ended up hearing sort of saying, oh, I'm way lower on Tyree Wilson than everybody else. It almost felt like a growing consensus that everybody was low on Tyree Wilson. But, I think there is something to, there's quite a large minority of people did not love him.
So all that's fine. I want to, on a positive note, adding him to Chandler Jones, right? So I made this point draft night. Chandler Jones was also a guy who became more productive in the NFL than he did in college, coming out of Syracuse. Mm-hmm. Did it under, Dave Ziegler's the GM here, Patriots ties, Josh McDaniels and all that stuff. So there's some similarities there. Chandler Jones on the current roster. I'm assuming he'll still be there by opening day, even with the big money that Chandler Jones is on from a contract standpoint. But you have Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson comes in. They can ease him into the mix. Dave Ziegler and then Champ Kelly, the assistant GM, we're talking about his versatility, ability to play up and down the defensive line. I will say Tyree Wilson plays hard and he's explosive. And I always think about the division matchups when you're trying to beat the Chiefs. And we talk a lot about when you're facing the Chiefs, do you really want to rush Mahomes too much? Because as soon as you get out of your pass rush lane, boom, he's stepping up in and around. I wonder how much Tyree Wilson's length could really help with that if you kind of mush rush him and then, you try to work the escape lane route that for Mahomes and Wilson's it's a very specific thing here, Sam.
But I
think Tyree Wilson could be very good at that in particular in the Chiefs matchups.
I actually feel like he's exactly the type of defensive end that will never get Patrick Mahomes on the ground. I'm not going to say he will never sack Patrick Mahomes, but the way Mahomes is always a tenth of a second faster than whoever's chasing him?
Yes.
There's limits to that, right? If Nolan Smith is chasing down Patrick Mahomes, he's getting to him eventually, right? I don't know that Tyree Wilson is. Tyree Wilson strikes me as the kind of guy that will spend 45 yards running in a lazy S right behind Patrick Mahomes.
Maybe. This isn't a running thing. This is a more like Wilson, because of his length, he's going to compress the pocket. And then if Mahomes tries to escape through your gaps, I've got the wingspan to grab you.
But start it in the pocket. Like, draw this S, right? We're in the pocket now. And then Mahomes is going to spin out to the left, right? This is the bottom of the backwards S, I guess. So he's going to spin out left. He's then going to loop all the way back to the right, like over the middle of the field, past the linebackers. Then he's going to start looping left again. We're going to get deep into the secondary at this point. He's going to end up with like a 25-yard run here, having taken Tyree Wilson on like a big S curve all the way through the entire defense, never getting his hands on him. That's what's going to happen.
Can't wait for Chiefs Raiders next year.
I don't know. We've said this all the way through the draft process. Didn't love Tyree Wilson conceptually. I think this draft to me is a combination of the Raiders generally seeming to reach relative to consensus, which is obviously something they've had a track record of, albeit with different people in charge. And then even the players they drafted that weren't reaches were usually players that I just didn't love, which makes me predisposed to not love this draft.
So they got Wilson at 7. I mean, that was kind of chalk. That was expected. They did highlight. You never hear this really from executives. Ziegler did say we were comfortable taking Paris Johnson there, and it was another one. Like as the draft got closer, Sam, I started to visualize the tackles in the top 10 way more than I had leading up to it. I really wonder if Paris Johnson would have been the pick there if he hadn't gone at 6 for the Raiders, because they said, hey, we were comfortable with Paris. We were comfortable with Tyree Wilson there. They loved him. I mean, they raved about Wilson and his visit and all that stuff. I know you hear that a lot at these times, but can't wait to watch his development, even though the numbers aren't great for Tyree Wilson as far as projecting him. The Michael Mayer pick, look, he was expected to go in the first.
So and
they traded up to get him in the second, right? They went and targeted him.
That's the classic example, right? That's maybe the one pick, or certainly the clearest example where they got real value. I mean, a lot of people expected Mayer to go in the first. A lot of people thought he was the best tight end available. They get him at pick number 35 in the second round. Great value. I just think that there's a reason Mayer went towards the second round rather than the first round. I didn't love his tape as much as other people, and I was particularly perturbed by him showing up and being both shorter and lighter by a significant margin than he was supposed to be. I just feel like that kind of took away his trump card, which is, all right, I'm not getting amazing, I'm not going to beat people for speed, quickness, but I'm huge. Like I can go out there and win the way Gronk did, which is just beating people for size and overwhelming them physically. But then he shows up 15 pounds smaller than that, still ran slow. I just don't love Mayer as a player, but you can't argue with the value. I think that's great value for them.
It's an intriguing group of pass catchers now. With Devontae Adams as your top wide receiver, Jacoby Myers as your 2, good route runner, good fit as a 2, Hunter Renfrow working the slot if he's still around, and then your 2 tight ends that you've brought in, Michael Mayer, 3 that you've brought in really, Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper. And also O.J. Howard, because everyone should take an O.J. Howard flyer just in case he figures it out here in like year 6 or 7. But Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper to go with the trio of wide receivers, that's solid. Philip Dorsett as your deep threat could be good for Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo under center. Byron Young, he has multi-gap ability on the defensive line. You could tell I think they were focused on improving the defensive line. They have so many holes on the defensive side for like the 5th or 6th straight year for the Raiders. I think at least attacking the defensive line with a couple picks does make sense here.
Yep.
It was interesting about the Trey Tucker pick. So it's pick 100. And if there is a complaint that I have with how NFL teams work the board and all that stuff, they picked Trey Tucker at pick 100, and they were like, he's a dual returner. So punt return, kick return, gunner.
Kick return at this point is basically irrelevant if you're an NFL team.
Yeah, when I get my GM job.
Punt returner, sure, but kick return.
But when I get my GM job, I'm going to get into the building and ask the football people, how many special teams positions can we cut? Just not even focus on. Is it better to build my roster with 2 extra quarterbacks just in case like Aiden O'Connell? Love that pick. That dude could be awesome. I mean, there's a small chance, but he could be amazing. The payout could be incredible. The payout of like a gunner, just don't suck on special teams, should be the goal. But I would ask the football people, like, how many special teams positions can we just neglect and still get away with it? And because there's fewer kick returns in the NFL, I will say there are way more kick returns as you get into December and January. A little underrated note. It's about 25% higher December and January when the games matter more. Weather and all that stuff. So it does matter a little bit more then. But do I really want to spend a top 100 pick when I'm already a not good roster? on special teams? I don't know. And because that's essentially what they did with Trey Tucker here at round 3, pick 100.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like a pretty massive reach relative to other receivers that were available, even his own teammate. I will say, so I don't like this draft generally. I did like Jacorian Bennett. I think he's a good player. I think he's the 4th best slot defender. 5th, I guess, if you could put Brian Branch in that category, but 4th best slot corner in this draft. And another guy that played primarily outside, so could be able to survive on the outside as well. But I suspect can kick inside and become a really good slot. But like he understands zone coverage really well, like falls off one guy, gets back into the threat behind him, plays through receivers' hands. Like he's smaller, undersized a little bit, but he's not going to just let a guy moss him at the catch point. He's going to keep fighting, breaks up a lot of passes that way. He also had a few dropped interceptions, like could have had much better numbers. I suspect his hands aren't great, but whatever. I like that. I think he's a good player, and I think that's a good value. Now, where he fits in this defense, a little bit more questionable, but round 4, good value. Like that pick.
Really athletic, man. And I think, you take those athletic upside type of players in the 4th round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for that.
All right, give me your Aiden O'Connell breakdown.
You've laid it out pretty well. The big time throws are out of this world.
It looks like different. Like you watch his big time throws and then his turnover-worthy plays, the reels back to back. It looks like different players. Like you would actually easily convince me those are different human beings, because all the things that you would have written down on the big time throws, which aren't just like, hey, there are some teams, quarterbacks, offenses where the big time throws are essentially, can you hit a moving target? There's very little to it, right? It's drop back, look for your number 1 read. He's open. Now I just need to hit him with the ball 40 yards downfield. So on the other hand, there are other big time throws where, he's got to work through a progression. He's got to maneuver in the pocket. He's got to hit a tight window. He's got to, navigate layering a throw over a linebacker in front of a safety, blah, blah, blah. Like there are different varieties of those. Aiden O'Connell's big time throws, like you'll be writing down stuff about how he's able to manipulate defenders, how he's able to, layer the throw past defenders, how he's able to squeeze it in through tight windows, vary the trajectory, the power, all these kinds of things. Writing down all these things, all of which are invalidated by his turnover-worthy play reel, where it's like, what the hell are you doing? Like the first one, it's like, oh, he sees this linebacker, delays a split second, layers it over the top of the second guy, hits him in stride, and then his first turnover, he just buries the ball into the face mask of the linebacker that's standing 10 yards in front of him.
Coach that out of him, Sam.
What the hell is happening?
Coach that out of him. You've described a Jameis Winston ish, and that's why I love it. I chase the upside with these quarterbacks. I think Aiden O'Connell, when you look at the guys that Josh McDaniels and say the Patriots regime through the years have tried to develop, like Ryan Mallett got there before McDaniels came back, I believe, but there was a little crossover there. Jarrett Stidham, both with New England and then last year with the Raiders, McDaniels. I think Aiden O'Connell could be the best developmental quarterback that Josh McDaniels has had. I don't know who I'm missing off the top of my head, but he could be the best developmental guy in the 4th round. I love this. I love it. Aiden O'Connell's going to start NFL football games, and it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a Thursday night game. Aiden O'Connell's getting the start. Jimmy G's banged up, That's what happens. Aiden O'Connell's getting the start, and he's going to, like Stidham did, take the Chiefs to the wire and all that. And there's think pieces about, is Aiden O'Connell the future for Josh McDaniels and the Raiders? All that stuff's going to happen at some point. I would pay to see O'Connell at training camp. I want to go watch him in training camp.
It is going to happen.
With the Raiders.
We're going to get 4 games out of Aiden O'Connell this year.
And I'm excited for it. I'm here for it.
And then we're going to start hearing about whether he's the future or not.
If Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones, every time you're scouting Big Ten corners and it's like O'Connell to Jones. You're seeing that all the time, right? So he grew on me more and more as I watched Big Ten cornerbacks go up against Purdue. Mm-hmm. Christopher Smith, the safety out of Georgia, also really productive safety, not a great athlete type of guy, but I think he could maybe make a contribution as a 5th rounder. So I'm lukewarm on the Raiders draft. Again, people know my Tyree Wilson numbers and projections, and I don't love him as a top 10 pick. That's going to be the biggest thing, but I do love Mayer in the 2nd. So PFF went B- with Trevor liking Tyree Wilson and everything that he brings to the table. So
yeah, I mean, I think generally they've fallen foul of the biggest risk right now of drafting, which is reaches. If you are reaching relative to the consensus board by a significant margin, most picks, you might be in trouble. So the Mayer one obviously
But they didn't in pick 1 and 2. So, and Byron Young, was he that much higher?
Yeah.
Where'd he go?
It was like 100 and something.
Where did I have Byron Young? Yeah, 122. That wasn't that far. I didn't see reaches there.
Pretty
I don't
big reach.
What?
That's a pretty big reach.
To 90?
70.
70. Okay, I thought it was 90.
No.